Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I'm bringing you my first wrap up of the year. I'm here to tell you all the books that I managed to read in the month of January.
It's coffee time!
So January was a very intense month for me, a lot of life changes, decisions. We are deep into planning renovations of this house. I'm working a lot. I'm working like almost 7 days a week every week, which is a little bit crazy, but that's what happens when you have two jobs and you also have a YouTube channel. But even then, I did manage to read 8 books during the month of January, and I think it's because I had a very strong start, so I was reading very quickly at the beginning of the month, and then that kind of decreased. So I'm a little bit scared for the months to come, but I managed to read 8 books in the month of January, so I'm here to let you know my thoughts on them. If you're new here, welcome to our Coffee Times. I like to rate my books with Coffee Max, and I start with the lowest to end up on the highest one rated, so that we always end up on a positive note. Unfortunately, the month of January did have a couple of books that didn't quite work for me as I had anticipated, and that is the first one that we're going to talk about, which was my biggest disappointment of the month. And that is When Mimi Went Missing by Suya Sukumar, and this is a YA mystery thriller. I got the ARC for this one last year and I was really excited to read it, so I ended up reading it during the month of January. It started quite well, you know, like your typical YA mystery thriller where something happens and now we have to figure it out what happened. But then it started to drag so bad that I was just trying to quickly get through the book, and if you've ever experienced that feeling, is not a good one. We followed Tanvi, and after her parents perish in an accident, she's basically adopted by her aunt and she goes to live with her, and she's really happy because now she can basically live with her cousin Mimi, and Mimi becomes kind of like a sister to her. She's very protective of Tanvi because she has been through a lot, so they are kind of best friends and cousins. They live together, they go to the same school, but one day everything changes because Mimi befriends the popular girl at school called Beth, and she is a mean girl. So as soon as Beth and Mimi become besties, Mimi forgets about Tanvi and kind of, you know, leaves her alone, and Tanvi is really hurt. Tanvi is considering doing something to seek revenge and to expose Mimi and Beth for the mean girls that they are. However, before she gets even the chance to do that, Mimi mysteriously disappears after attending a party. With Mimi now missing, that is our main mystery. What happened to Mimi? Who saw her last? So we go through, you know, interrogations by the police. We see Tanvi trying to figure out what Mimi did last, things that she can maybe remember to help the police, and that is the mystery to solve. Where is Mimi? Is she alive? What happened to her? Unfortunately, even though I was really invested at the beginning and I wanted to know what happened to Mimi, the book started to get really repetitive, and there is nothing worse for me than a book just repeating the same thing over and over again. It was kind of rehashing the story, the dialogues were a little bit stiff, and it made it difficult for me to keep my excitement. When things finally started happening towards the end, it got a little bit more exciting, and there were some letters and other mixed media added to it that made it a little bit more interesting, but by the point that I was there, you know, at the end, I was already not happy with the book, so it couldn't save it. Like, I did enjoy the ending and the reveal and everything, and I think it's really difficult to reel you back in and really like wow you at the end after you have been just trying to push through the chapters. While this book might not have been for me, and I did consider DNFing this book, I can see why other people might enjoy it. Maybe it was just not for me. Next we have School of the Dead by Avi, and this one I was really excited about because it is a middle grade, and it had been a hot minute since I had read a middle grade book, and I was really excited about this one. I listened to this on audiobook, you know, when I was going on walks or doing things around the house, and that helped as well to push through because this one, similar to the other one, was also a book that dragged a lot. Tony's uncle Charlie has to move in with them, with his family, and at the beginning he's not really sure that he's gonna be happy about this new situation because now he has to share also the house with his uncle. The parents think it's great because when they're not home, then the uncle can take care of him. And even though Tony was skeptical at the beginning, he ended up really bonding with his uncle, and they even made plans together, and it was a beautiful relationship. But then, alas, the uncle died. He passed away, and it was a really, heavy thing for Tony to process, and he started seeing his uncle everywhere. So he thought, this is a figment of my imagination. This is my way of processing grief. That's why I keep seeing him around, even though he's no longer with us. But soon he will realize that actually what he's seeing is his Uncle Charlie's ghost. After Uncle Charlie's death, the family decides to relocate to San Francisco so that Tony can go to a new school called Panda School. And when he gets to the school, he starts to wonder, why is this school so special? And then he sees a ghost at the window, and he realizes that, okay, I need to figure out what's going on with this school and why do I keep seeing ghosts everywhere? Well, I like the premise, and I was excited to see what kind of adventures our main character was going to have in this school and him being able to see the ghosts. However, this book also started to drag. It started to ramble, and it got repetitive, and I was like, oh no, here we go again. For me, it was also kind of missing an emotional layer because I didn't feel like I could connect to the characters or their story in an emotional level. And I know this is a middle grade, but it doesn't mean that it cannot go a little bit deeper into the themes and the story and the emotions, because young readers can definitely benefit from all of that as well. Sadly, it was not as exciting as I had hoped it would be, especially, with the name of the book, and it was also my first Abby book. I've heard other people saying that this was one of their least favorites, so I might try another one of his books. Next, we have The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden, and this is a book that was pitched as a horror paranormal historical book, and I will tell you, this is more historical and fantastical than horror. So keep that in mind if you wanted to try it. While I appreciated the setting, I appreciated the story, the siblings, and what they were talking about, the whole experience, I really struggled with the writing style and with the pacing of the book. We are in 1918 in the midst of World War I, and we follow two siblings as they tell us their story when they are struggling and going through this wartime period. We have Freddie, who is in the trenches fighting for his country, and then we have Laura, who is a nurse also taking care of the wounded from war. One day, Laura is discharged because she is hurt during the battles, and she goes back home and she receives a box, and that box basically tells her that her brother is dead and they are sending her back his belongings. However, she gets a really weird feeling from this box, and something tells her that her brother is still alive. So she decides to travel back to the battlefields and gets a job at a hospital there because she wants to figure out what happened to her brother. Even if he is indeed dead, she wants to know what happened to him and get some answers. The story is told through two different POVs. We follow Laura and what she is doing to try to find her brother, and then we also follow Freddie. He is basically in the battlefield in the midst of everything, and we start to figure out what happened to him. I really like to go back and forth between the two characters, and this book is a little bit more about the trauma of war and how it affects people and the horrors of war than anything else. It is about how enemies become friends in the toughest of times when you have no other choice in order to stay alive, and then as soon as you're free, as soon as everything goes back to normal, then you're supposed to be enemies again, and you're pitched against each other by your own countries, and the absurdity of it all. So this is more of a historical fiction with fantastical elements than anything else. Like, the paranormal aspect to the book is very, very thin. The book did have some fantastical elements that were interesting to me at the beginning, but at some point I started to be a little bit bored about that as well. We hear about this hotel that appears and only certain people can see it and go in, and it's managed by this very charismatic guy, and a lot of people that go into that hotel, they never come back out again. I did enjoy Freddie's POVs more than Laura's. I felt like he was more of a realistic character. I could see and smell and hear everything he was going through, and his story was a lot more compelling. When it comes to Laura, I felt like she was a little bit of a bland character in a way. Everything was so easy for her, everything was handed to her, you know, like it just felt a little bit unrealistic in a way. I mean, this is fiction and this is fantastical at times, so talk about being realistic, but I just felt like I couldn't connect to her as much as I could to Freddie. Once you get to the end and you read the author's note, a lot of things are gonna make a lot more sense, and I really did enjoy that. Maybe I would have loved to see something like that at the very beginning, so that it would have like set my expectations about the characters and kind of like the historical inspiration that she got to write this book. So this book started very strong for me. I remember when I started it, I was surprised that I was enjoying a book about war in a historical fiction book so much, but at some point it did start to lose fuel for me. I felt the pacing was very slow, and the payback that I was getting as a reader was not enough in every chapter, so I did kind of like push myself to the end because I wanted to know how things were going to be resolved, and I did enjoy the ending, but I feel like this book was a little bit too long and slow paced for my taste. But I think for people that love historical fiction books and they don't mind a little bit of fantasy in it, they will really enjoy this. We're going back to YA mystery thriller, and I read No Place Left to Hide by Megan Lally, and this is the author's second book, and I think I enjoyed the first one a little bit more than this one because the mystery in this one was really good, but this was more your typical YA mystery thriller with teenagers and a little bit of drama at school and all of that. We follow Brooke, and she's determined to finish the academic year with the best grades that she can because she really wants to be accepted to her dream college, and that is all that is important to her right now. Nothing else matters to her. Her parents are putting a lot of pressure to her because they also want her to succeed in life, and also they want to keep their family name clean. That's why Brooke is also avoiding any parties or anything else to avoid further scandals. Something happened some months ago that Brooke is trying to forget. Since school is over and there is nothing else that she can do but just wait to get the letter and see if she has been accepted to her dream college, she in the end agrees to go to a party because Dylan, her love interest, is going to be there. So she's like, okay, if I'm gonna leave for college soon, I might as well just go to the last party and try to talk to Dylan. However, she decides to leave the party early because she feels uncomfy, and she's driving back home with her best friend Jen when a psychopath apparently starts to follow them. It is told from a dual timeline, so we follow Brooke a couple of months ago when she was at a party and something happened. And we follow Brooke in the present while she's driving back home with her friend Jen, and somebody in another car is chasing them down the highway. The book is very thrilling and it does keep you at the edge of your seat, so I think that when it comes to the tension in a mystery thriller and the build-up, the book did a really good job. I read this book in 2 days. It was very engaging, it was fast-paced, and I really wanted to know the resolution. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted the truth to come out, and even though when we got to the ending, things were kind of, you know, being put into place for me. Like my head was like, oh, I know what's coming. Like I could predict things when they were coming. I really enjoyed this one. The thrill of the chase between the cars, the mystery that's being kind of revealed bit by bit because you jump back and forth from the past to the present and you're still trying to figure out what happened at that party some months ago. So it just keeps you really, really engaged. I really enjoyed this one. So basically 2 out of 2 books that the author has written have really worked for me, and I would recommend any of the 2. We're staying on brand, we're staying with YA mystery thriller, and I read Nitty Little Things by Chanel de Samour, and this is a book that is being published now in the month of February, so I'm here to tell you what I thought of it. Saria is a 17-year-old that has a very special talent. She can hear in her head what other people need, but it is only related to material things, which means when she walks into a classroom, for example, she can hear colleagues saying, oh, I need a pen, I need a rubber band, whatever it is they need, she can hear it in her brain. That's why she carries at all times with her a tote bag kind of thing that she calls Santa bag, because in there she has like the most regular day-to-day items that people could possibly need, and she tries to give these items to the people that need them without them really noticing, because she doesn't want people to figure out that she has this talent. So obviously when she enters a room that is really busy, that is like a sensory overload for her, and that is why she tries to avoid like really busy places. However, in her neighborhood, black girls are going missing, and she feels that the police doesn't treat the cases the same way that they would treat a white girl's disappearance, and she's starting to get really mad about it. When her friend Deja goes missing, she's like, okay, this is it, I need to do something about it. So she starts to try to use her talent any way she can to try to figure out what happened to her friend Deja, since she has no trust whatsoever on the police. So our main character is navigating, you know, the growing pains of being a teenager with this talent that can be more of a curse than a blessing most days, and now her best friend is missing, and this is going to be her hardest life test today. The book is about the discrimination on the police departments and how they treat black girls different from white girls. I really like the mystery thriller part of the book, even though it is not the most predominant thing in the book. I would say the mystery thriller is a little bit in the back burner. This is more a statement about the police and the discrimination, about, you know, growing up, about figuring out who you are, accepting who you are, because our main character has this talent that she's always thought it was a curse, but sometimes it can be also used for good. The book focuses more on dysfunctional families and friendships and all of that, so I would say when it comes to the mystery thriller, this one is a little bit lighter on that regard. I think for a debut novel, this was such a good book, and I think it's very important to tell these stories, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are gonna read this book and they're gonna feel identified with it, they're gonna share feelings, and they are going to see themselves portrayed in this book. When I was reading it, I started to think that this was a mystery thriller type of book for people that like Angie Thomas. Like, for some reason Angie Thomas came to mind when I was reading this book, and I thought it was a very solid book, so if you were considering picking it up, I would say go for it. Next we have Love Immortal by Kit Vincent, and this is a book about vampires, but it's also dark academia, which I'm starting to figure out that dark academia works best for me when vampires are involved. Jonathan's life has not been the best. His family basically has banished him from the family when they found out that he was gay, and he also lost the love of his life, so he's a little bit lost at the moment. Now he's starting over in a prestigious isolated school in Vermont, and he has at least his best friend there to help him. He also manages to get his dream job at school, which is basically to take care of rare and vintage books at the library and make sure that people treat those books correctly, all of that. And he's really excited about that, but things are about to change at school when a new professor comes around. It is Professor Bathory. And when you hear that surname, you're like, I smell vampire. So Jonathan is going to find out that vampires are real, and he is going to kind of form a friendship with the professor because they both want to retrieve a book that was stolen from the rare books section. I would say in this book, the romance comes very, very late. It's not something that is like the main thing in the book, which I really appreciated because I thought this was going to be more of a romance than anything else. But this book is more a dark academia and a tale about vampires and what it means to be immortal, and, you know, how people see life differently when they have been around us for hundreds of years. So I would say if you were scared to pick up this book because it is a romance book in a way, don't be. Because I do think that the romance is not as predominant as a lot of people would think, also when you see the cover of the book. This book was also a light retelling of Dracula, which I really appreciated, so I think if you like Dracula, you would also enjoy to hear this story. I love all the talk about the dark books and how to preserve them, you know, as somebody that loves books, obviously that would also be my dream job. The horror and the romance are both on the lighter side. I would say, like I said before, this is more of a dark academia, and I think that's why this worked so well for me. This book was a great kind of gothic tale with haunting, atmospheric pacing. Like, I could feel the gothic aura that this book had. It was really, really good. There's some tension, some action-packed scenes, and you know, when the ball really starts rolling towards the end and there's more and more action scenes with vampires, I was thriving. Definitely recommend this one, you guys, especially if you love vampires and dark academia. And yeah, this one was a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to love this one as much as I did. Next we have Bat Eater by Kylie Lee Baker, and this was an anticipated read for me. From the books that were released in January, this was up on my list. I know this one is going to come a little bit later in the US, so I am sorry if you still cannot get your hands on this book, but I truly enjoyed it. This is an adult horror thriller that follows Cora. She is a crime scene cleaner, so we follow her around as she is basically cleaning crime scenes. However, the difference now in her life is that her sister has been murdered in front of her eyes. While they were both waiting for a train, somebody pushed her sister in front of a train and screamed "Bat Eater." This book is a social commentary on how East Asian women were treated during the pandemic. Even though Cora tries to move on with her life, as she starts going to the new crime scenes that need to be cleaned, she realizes that everybody that has been murdered recently have been East Asian women, and she starts to see a pattern there. She feels there is a serial killer on the loose targeting these women. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much hate that was put on the Asian folk, and I feel like this book really captured that, and there is a lot of rage in this book, as it should. And I think the social commentary was still not something that clouded the whole book and kind of affected your experience. Like, it is there and you can see it and you can feel it and you can read it in the pages, but you still get a great horror thriller. Cora is determined to figure out who is responsible for these murders, so together with her, you know, cleaning crew, she decides to investigate herself because, yet again, as it happens with many books, she has no hope for the police to figure this out. And if that wasn't all enough, Cora also has not prepared herself well enough for the Hungry Ghost Festival, which is something that I was so excited to read about because I didn't know about this tradition, and basically because she did not prepare herself well for that, she starts to see ghosts everywhere that are hungry, and that is kind of like the more supernatural aspect that the book has. It is a commentary about how society is really quick to judge people and just jumps in the bandwagon, points fingers because it's just easy, without doing their due diligence, without doing any research. Asian people were basically used as scapegoats when the pandemic happened, and I could feel all the rage and all the feelings that were interwoven in the story, and I really enjoyed this book. I feel like the author did such a good job to give us both a story about a crime serial killer and a supernatural story with ghosts, and a social commentary. Like, this book has absolutely everything. Now, Cora is not a main character that is very likable per se, so I thought that was also very interesting, and it reminded me to the main character in The Eyes Are the Best Part, which I feel works for me for some reason. Like, these two female main characters worked really well for me, even though they were kind of like on the gray area and they were a little bit kind of like dislikable at times, but I love them. This book uses horror to tell a story about mistakes that society keeps making over and over again and we don't seem to learn from. This is a great contemporary take on old ghost stories and just modernizing it and telling a very important story. And last but not least, we have Summer of Monsters by David Sodergren. And yes, this has been my favorite book of January, as I kind of expected, even though, let me tell you, from all the books by David Sodergren that I have read so far, this has been the more different. Like, this voice, the voice of our main character here, felt very different from the other ones. And I think it's because this one is told from the perspective of a teenager, but this is also a very different creature feature from what I'm used to from David Sodergren. This could almost be a YA book, except there's a lot of violence that comes, especially towards the end, that makes it and qualifies it for adult. But this felt for the majority like I was getting into a YA book. I think this will be a great book for people that want to get introduced to the author, to David Sodergren, because from all of his other books, maybe this is the one that it is a little bit less disturbing in general, a little bit less intense in some matters, but fear not, it does have blood and gore. Lucy is having a life crisis. His dad has relocated them to an isolated farm in the middle of nowhere. She is really mad because she has to start a new school. She misses the city life, her friends, but they have no other choice because basically they are broke. So the only thing that they could afford was this rusty, dusty old farm, so they have to move there. She's having trouble to adapt to this school and this place because she grew up in the city, and also she basically doesn't make friends at school per se. She gets actually in trouble with the mean girls from the very first day. So this felt very realistic. It's very interesting because David Sodergren is obviously not a teenage girl. But this book felt like very angsty, very like teenage girl. Like I could feel her frustration and her worries, and when you're having the growing pains of, you know, being a teenager, and then you're taken away from everything you know and anybody you know, and are thrown into a small town where everybody knows everybody's business and you are just a new kiddo. But Lucy is also going to discover that this small town is hiding a really big secret. As Lucy is trying to uncover the secrets of this small town that apparently are hidden somewhere in the woods, she's going to get herself obviously in danger. Will she be able to discover the monsters that this town hides? And if she does, is it going to cost her her life? This book was fun, it was quick, and it was very entertaining. I really enjoyed it, and I almost read this in just one sitting. It talks about the importance of just accepting reality, to be able to process and move on, and how not all monsters are evil, but most humans are. This book felt just campy, nostalgic, heartfelt, like I was going through the motions. In the afterword, it is explained that the whole story kind of was an inspiration based on something that actually happened, so it was really interesting to read that also at the end. I really enjoyed it. It's another banger by David Sodergren, and like I said, I think this is a great introduction to the author because I felt like it was one of the least disturbing ones and a little bit less messed up in general, but you're still gonna get great gore and blood. So those were the 8 books that I managed to read during the month of January. I hope that you enjoyed to hear my thoughts on the books. Let me know down below what is your favorite book that you read in the month of January. Thank you guys as always so much for watching, and I hope to see you all as always in our next coffee time. Bye!